We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. I'm Walker Wildmon. Glad to be with you on this brand new edition of the program. This is a broadcast of the American Family Radio Network. We're in over 30 states with our FM radio signal, 170 plus signals, radio towers around the country, and online at afr.net in all 50 states and around the world through afr.net and the American Family Radio app, which is free in your app store. Just type in AFR or American Family Radio in your app store. Click the download button, and you'll have access 24/7, 365 to American Family Radio content, both live and archived. There you go. All right, let's turn our attention to the Scripture. Then we will move into some of our other content for today. John chapter 1, verse 14, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, and the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." John chapter 1, verse 14. And so we have here the truth, the biblical truth, that Jesus is the Word. Jesus came as flesh, as the Son of God, and brought salvation to both the Jew and the Gentile. That is the gospel message. And this is also further proof of the Trinity and the existence of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in eternity. And John chapter 1 is just one of multiple places in Scripture where you can find the evidence and the proof and the biblical support of the Trinity. There you have it, John chapter 1, verse 14. "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, and the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." You know, the more I read Scripture, the more it is abundantly clear that the Word of God is truth, that the Word of God is truth. And it's perfectly corroborated. I mean, it's just fascinating to me how the First Testament, what people call the Old Testament, written thousands of years prior to Jesus, the Messiah coming, it prophesies on numerous occasions the coming of the Messiah, but not just the coming of a Messiah or the Messiah, but how he would come, Bethlehem, riding on a donkey, how he would be crucified, where he would be buried. All of this is prophesied in the Old Testament, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing, written by multiple authors throughout the course of several thousand years, and not refuted by any historian. The coming of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus is not refuted, cannot be refuted by any factual historical evidence. There is no body of Jesus been found. There's been no burial site where they say the bones are still here. There's places where we think Jesus might have been buried, but they're empty. The tombs are empty. And so absolutely amazing. But the more you read Scripture, the more the Word of God is proven to be truth in everyday life. All right, the tours that we have, speaking of truth and the land of the Bible and where Jesus walked, we're going to be going to Israel in 2026. Specifically, my dad and mom, Tim and Allison, they're going to be going to Israel. They've been leading groups for 30 years to the land of the Bible. They're going to be there in March. Also, right after that, my brother and I are going to be in Greece doing a Footsteps of Paul tour. And so if you want to go on those trips or you just want to read a little bit about them, check out the itineraries and the pricing, you can go over to wildmangroup.com to check those out, wildmangroup.com. And registration is going to close in December. And so if you want to go, you need to be studying up on it now, preparing, and then, of course, you need to register before the month of December. So wildmangroup.com, check out all the information. The last item I'll mention before we jump into the news of the week is Operation Christmas Child. We're continuing to push this through November 24th. If you want to participate, we would encourage you to participate in packing a shoebox, or if you can't pack a shoebox and you want to donate, and Operation Christmas Child will pack a shoebox for you, you can do all of that at SamaritansPurse.org, SamaritansPurse.org. Right there on the homepage, you will see the links to Operation Christmas Child, SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. All right, I want to cover this story while we have time this segment. There's been a genocide of Christians in Nigeria for some time now, for many years. Islam, specifically jihad, radical Islam, terrorism, has taken a stronghold in Africa, specifically in Nigeria. And it's become very dangerous for Christians in Nigeria, and thousands, tens of thousands of them have been slaughtered in the country of Nigeria. And so let's listen to this Fox report giving us a little bit of backgrounder on what President Trump is doing and a little bit of backgrounder of what is actually going on in Nigeria. Clip 1.
John, the president has been very vocal in the last 24 hours on Truth Social. I want to read you just a couple excerpts of one that came out 5 minutes ago. The president said, quote, "If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killings of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may very well go into that now, quote, disgraced country, guns a-blazing," he says. He is then hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. And he also says in that post, warning the Nigeria government better move fast. Now, yesterday, the president posted also on Truth Social announcing that he was going to put this country as a country of particular concern, saying something must be done. He's now asking Congressman Riley Moore, Chairman Tom Cole, and the House Appropriations Committee to look into it and to report back.
Well, there you have it. There's thousands of Christians every few months being slaughtered in Africa, specifically West Africa and Nigeria. President Trump designating this a particular area of concern, or country of concern, is significant because of the resources that the State Department and the military will dedicate to it. And something has to be done about this. I mean, we can't say that, we're going to be funneling billions of dollars to Ukraine to help the Ukrainians, which we can debate how much money we should put into that. We can't also say we need to help Israel and then ignore what's going on in Nigeria. That's the point. We can't express this concern and outrage over certain crises, but then ignore what's going on in Nigeria. We have to be consistent with our foreign policy and our concern for minorities that are being killed and persecuted in Nigeria. And so we appreciate President Trump doing this. It's been long overdue, and I've got to admit I haven't spent any time on this, which is a shame. But the news cycles ebb and flow, and but the last month or so I've kind of been tracking this. But it's a big deal, and is a tragedy and needs to be addressed. And whatever resources the U.S. needs to use, we should. To stop the slaughter of Christians in Nigeria. And this is what Islam brings. And I want to connect this with our domestic policy, and I spent a pretty good amount of time earlier in the week talking about how we need to focus on domestic policy because Americans are hurting. We've got our own problems on our shoreline. But this issue in Nigeria, we can definitely bring this home and look at how it's affecting our domestic politics. You have had the mass importation of Islamic refugees or Islamic immigrants, legal, these are mostly legal immigrants, by the way, that are being brought in through various programs into America, to such an extent that Somalia is one of the most popular nations in which we import many Muslims from. But you go up to Minnesota and other states, but particularly Minnesota, and this is a major problem. This is a major problem where you have, 30, 40, 50% of a population within different municipalities that are majority Muslim. These are majority Muslim cities in America. It's shocking. And it's not just shocking on its face because they're a non-Christian religion or faith background, but when you look into the ideology that comes with Islam, it's very bad and very contrary to America's founding. So there's the Christian viewpoint of how it's a false religion, and we can argue that, which is a valid position. But even if you set that aside, the practical domestic policy implications of Islam in America is bad. It's no good, because everywhere Islam goes, freedom falls, liberty falls. And they fundamentally, true Muslims, I'm not talking about secular or Muslims in name only. I'm talking about true Muslims that adhere to the Islamic religion and specifically Sharia law. It is incompatible with America's Constitution and America's founding ideals and founding precepts, principles. They're incompatible. They don't work together. And if you want, an exhibit, well, you can go to Europe. Europe's just an utter dumpster fire right now. And you've got these, rape, the rape rate in Europe is horrendous. I mean, these young girls are like walking around with guns and knives when they're going to school because they're afraid they're going to be raped by a Muslim. That's legit. This is not, I'm not exaggerating it. This is a legit problem. They've got rape gangs in the UK and in Europe, and these are Muslims that have immigrated over to Europe. And it's actually become an entire scandal with the governments in Europe that have been ignoring this, pushing it under the rug, and actually punishing people who bring it up or who file police reports on this. And so, but we've been told, right, over the last 20 years, we've been told that we can't be against Islam. We can't talk out against Islam because then we're being Islamophobic. We're being narrow-minded. We're being haters. We're being bigots. The Southern Poverty Law Center is going to come after us, right? You've got all these different threats. And I'll never forget Pamela Geller, I think was her name, but she was notorious for speaking out against Islam. And I'm not saying I agreed with all of her strategies, but my point is, bringing up her name, is that she has essentially gone into hiding. Like, I haven't seen her appear on television. I haven't seen, I think her name was Pamela. Bobby can help me out on this. Yeah, Pamela Geller. She was known for speaking out against Islam in America to such a degree that she became under so much threat that she had to go into hiding. And I haven't seen her do public appearances or anything since probably several years ago, because she was speaking out on Islam, and Islamists were doing death threats and threatening domestic terrorism against Pamela Geller and her organization. And so that's just one example of many. And then you just had the FBI, by the way, bust several men, Islamic men, who were threatening a terror attack on Halloween on American soil. So this is a problem. Islam is a problem. We have to address it. We got to talk about it. And we definitely don't need to import more people, more Muslims, through our immigration system that don't believe in America.
At the Core podcast are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us today on the program. And one of the topics that we talk about frequently, including just earlier this week with, here on the program with various guests, is the topic of education in America. We've produced multiple videos on this. And so I want to introduce Sherry Few with us, president, founder of U.S. Parents Involved in Education, otherwise known as USPIE, on this report about the teachers' unions and the amount of money that is being funneled and donated to radical left-wing organizations through the teachers' unions. Sherry, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me back on.
Well, Sherry, before we jump into this news release and this latest announcement in the recent months about union dues and teachers union and where the money's going, tell us about your organization's U.S. Parents Involved in Education.
Okay, so United States Parents Involved in Education, or USPIE, as you referred to as our acronym, we've been around for about 10 years. It started out as an organization that I founded in South Carolina, where I lived. It was South Carolina Parents Involved in Education. And South Carolina PIE has been around since 2000. So I had worked in my state fighting, it started when my kids were in government schools and I saw their curriculum and I was pushing back, and we led the fight against the Common Core standards in 2010, which was a big fight happening all over the country. So after 2 years of lobbying and working hard to try to repeal Common Core, only to have it rebranded, which happened all over the country. And by the way, every state in the nation outside of Florida still has the Common Core standards. They've been implementing them now for 15 years. But when we failed, and I talked with colleagues around the country, they shared the same story. 2 years of working to get rid of those faulty standards, only to have them rebranded by their legislature. So that's when we built the national organization with my colleagues around the country in 2010, and we adopted the mission of closing the U.S. Department of Education and ending all federal education mandates, because we understood that the majority of the nefarious pedagogies originate with the federal government and incentivized with federal dollars. So that's who we are, and we're fighting all sorts of battles in education. There's just so many. It's easy topic to cover.
Let me ask you this before we move on to the teachers unions. Do you think, obviously, Common Core in its essence is still around? Have any states completely ditched it, or is it pretty much still alive under a different name? I know obviously it is in some states, but I mean, have some states officially moved away from it because of the disaster that it is?
Only Florida.
Only Florida.
And we have seen Florida under Governor DeSantis' leadership be, just a stalwart on education policy. He has implemented so many things. He's the model for the rest of the country. And they did adopt a better set of standards and no longer teach Common Core. But to my knowledge and my colleagues, every other state in the nation is still implementing it under a different name. Most states call it college and career ready standards. That's what they call it in South Carolina, where I live.
Sherry, the teachers' unions have been a major topic, and they've been far left for a long time, specifically the National Educators Association. And in some states, the dues are mandatory. In some states, they're not. But in almost every state, they treat it as if it's mandatory until you start asking questions. I'll never forget, my wife got the packet when she was hired on as a teacher, and in it may not have been NEA, but it was one of basically the associations or the unions. Maybe it was a Mississippi-based one, but nonetheless, the form treated it as if it was mandatory, right? And then you start asking questions and you learn, well, it's not really mandatory. But in many instances it is. So talk about just kind of the structure of the teachers' unions and how in their current form, they're really not serving the teachers or the students.
Right. So in most states, as you indicated, it is mandatory and it actually comes directly out of the teacher's paycheck before she's even paid. So they're extracting money from teachers' paychecks. And then this is what's bankrolling their lobbying and their advocacy and their funding of, and the report that we sent you is in just since 2022. So in 3 years, they've spent of those dues, the teachers' money, $43.5 million on left-leaning organizations. So, and it's not in every state, but even in states like South Carolina, where we are union free, it's a, right to work state, we still have the influence of the unions because we have the South Carolina Education Association. So while it's not a union, it is definitely the affiliate of NEA, and it's a trade association. So we deal with trade associations even beyond the NEA and AFT. We've got, the Superintendents Association, the Middle School Teachers or Principals Association. The list goes on and on. So there are plenty of trade associations that we also deal with, and they have a lot of money, as we see in this report. And I know that you were going to highlight some of the places they're spending it.
Yeah, this report from September talks about which nonprofit groups, mostly nonprofit groups, some of these are LLCs, which are supported by the NEA through basically donations directly from the NEA. And the names of these groups are like dingers, right? This is going to get people's attention. One of the groups that was supported to the tune of roughly $30,000 was a group called Gender Inclusivity LLC. The other one, obviously, Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, GLSEN, SEN. Many people heard about that. $60,000 to the Human Rights Campaign Foundation. And then you've got another $200,000 to Black Progressive Action Coalition. That sounds like a doozy right there. And there's many more that are like that. $322,000 of the Race Forward and Race Forward Act. These are all left-wing groups. This is shocking, Sherry. I mean, the NEA, there's no hiding it here. I mean, they're an arm of the Democrat Party. That's a fact.
It is a fact. And so there's another report that we highlighted recently where they're also, I think it was $250,000 in the last 2 years, the two unions combined have contributed to Democrats' campaigns, political campaigns. So it's not just all of these left-wing organizations, but they're also funding campaigns. They have high-paid lobbyists that are very influential. One of the names that didn't make it in our press release from the original report from Defending Education that your listeners will also identify with was $100,000 to protect constitutional abortion rights. So yes, it's in your face. They don't hide it. Their conventions are somewhat, they're supposed to be private, but somehow we always get news leaked out of their conventions. And last year's convention, they passed resolutions to support the No Kings movement. So, we shouldn't be surprised when we saw those riots where there were so many teachers involved and teachers just doing and saying outlandish things. So, yes, this is who they are and they don't hide it. And that's why in our report that we just recently released, the title of the report is Are Government Schools Redeemable? So we address that question in our report by laying out 5 key issues that we see as roadblocks to reforming and redeeming government schools. And one of the 5, as you would assume, is the unions and the huge influence that they have over education policy and those who are making decisions about education in our country. So they are a serious threat. And until we can figure out a way to overcome the influence of these 5 issues in our report, our answer to the question is no, they are not redeemable, at least not in the short term. And that's why we encourage parents to get their children out. And in our report, we're also serious about people that think that there might be a way to reform education. And if they're serious about it, we supply ideas about how we can move in that direction. But again, it's not going to happen in the short term. In the meantime, parents need to be warned that government schools are toxic, they are evil, and their children will be harmed if they leave them in government schools.
Hey, Sherry, tell our folks your website, how they can read more about your work and keep up with the various reports that you guys are putting out.
Sure. So our website is USPIE, that's USPI.org. And there you will find this report that I just mentioned. It was only released just a few weeks ago. We also have a blueprint for how to close the U.S. Department of Education. That's been out for some time. And we're actually working with Congressman Moore from Alabama and his staff and sharing the details of that report. And he has a bill in Congress that will close the Department of Education, which we support. There's also a blueprint for states to wean themselves off the federal funding. What most people don't understand is that states only derive about 10% of their education budget from the federal government. And so one of the steps in our blueprint for states to wean themselves off is the cost of compliance study, because we think if a state studies how much it costs for them to comply with all the mandates that come along with the funding, they will realize that even that 10% is much smaller. It will be reduced to maybe even 3 or 4%. And is it worth ceding control of your classrooms to the government for that small percentage of funding? So there's all of that on the website. And I'd like to mention our film, Truth and Lies in American Education, is accessible there. It's a great place for people to go that aren't familiar with how toxic the schools are. It's a great expose. And then lastly, our podcast, which airs once a week, and it's titled Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few.
Very good, Sherry. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Absolutely. Again, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. USPIE.org, USPIE.org. All the links that Sherry just mentioned are there, including the podcast. And this one's a good one, the blueprint to close the U.S. Department of Education. That's there on the website as well, USPIE.org, U.S. Parents Involved in Education. All right, another story I want to get to before we wrap up this segment is the Obamacare disaster that here we are over a decade down the road, more than that, since President Obama and Congress and the Democrats passed Obamacare, otherwise known as the Affordable Care Act. Listen to this. By the way, that's been a fundamental debate on this funding legislation, is whether we're going to further subsidize Obamacare. But I've got to play this clip that just broke today from a Democrat senator talking about how Obamacare has essentially failed to bring affordable health care. This is going to be clip 4.
I owe you an answer on why it is I'm standing here today asking to extend something that was temporary. And here's the reason. We did fail to bring down the cost of health care.
I was shocked to hear that. This is a Democrat senator. Let me see which senator this is. This is Senator Welch from Vermont. He admits on the Senate floor in the U.S. Capitol, while they're debating whether Republicans should vote to further subsidize, even beyond the standard subsidies, Obamacare. That's what this is all about, folks. Listen to me. This is about also illegal immigrants and whether we're going to continue paying for their health care. But this is primarily about the failure of Obamacare, okay? Obamacare has failed. Obamacare is falling apart, all right? And the Democrats and some Republicans, but primarily the Democrats, they used COVID as a cover, as a mask, to double or add to the existing Obamacare subsidies to cover up and mask the unaffordability of Obamacare. Track with me. Democrats created Obamacare, Obamacare fails, and Democrats cover up the failure by doubling the subsidies. That's what's going on. And so they did this under the guise of COVID, Those double subsidies are coming to an end. And when they come to an end, which they are, then the whole world will see how unaffordable Obamacare is. And it will push people away from the Obamacare exchange into the private market. It will be a disaster for the legacy of President Obama. And Democrats don't want that to happen. That's what this entire shutdown is all about. And if Obamacare crumbles over the next 12 months, President Trump and the entire Republican Party apparatus will be completely exonerated in their decade-long march against Obamacare that the late John McCain notoriously kept on life support by the thumbs down on the repeal and the replace of Obamacare in Trump 1.0. And there you have it, Democrat Senator Peter Welch from Vermont admitting on the Senate floor, on the record, that we, quote, we did fail to bring down the cost of health care, end quote, talking about Obamacare. This is why it's so important for the Republicans to hold firm. They cannot give the Democrats what they want. I don't care how long this shutdown goes on. The Republicans cannot give the Democrats what they want, because what the Democrats want is to continue masking and lying to the American people about the failure of their policies. Let Obamacare fail. Push people to the private market, incentivize the private sector, create competition that will drive down health insurance and then will drive down health care. We have to hold the line on not furthering to subsidize Obamacare. And by the way, did you know Obamacare, they had subsidies built in initially when they first passed it, and then these are doubling the subsidies. So this whole thing's a racket. We cannot let Obamacare stay alive.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to the Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us on this last segment of today's program. Chris Woodward is with us from American Family News, afn.net. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Well, Chris, Democrat socialist, self-described, by the way, who thinks capitalism is evil, those are his words.
Yes.
Mamdani is now the, correct me if I'm wrong, well, this was the mayoral race. This wasn't the primary.
Correct.
Yeah, this was the race.
He is the mayor-elect of New York City. Yes.
New York City. Wow. Give us a little rundown on some of the stuff you've been studying and reporting on regarding this race.
Yeah, well, some of the things that Mamdani has made a name for himself by pushing include, he's talked this outrageous policy where he's going to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he ever sets foot in New York City, because Netanyahu is a war criminal committing genocide. Those are things that Mamdani has said. But here domestically, his policies include things like a $30 an hour minimum wage, which is almost twice the current minimum wage in New York City, which is already an expensive place to live based on things like the minimum wage. And then two, he's wanting to do city-owned grocery stores because he says food is too expensive and the government's going to help you by opening up taxpayer-funded grocery stores and selling you products at a cheaper price, which history would show does not work. And I say that based on a guy that I interviewed just going into the election. His name is David McGarry, and he did a report on this for Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Based on your expertise and research on the issue, do city-owned grocery stores work?
I believe that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. And city-owned grocery stores have failed across the United States, in Kansas, in Florida, in Missouri. And yet, Zoran Mamdani thinks that the way to solve the perceived problems with availability and affordability of food in New York is to try the same failed socialistic experiment again.
One of the things that people don't even take into account with city-owned grocery stores is that even if these things were to open and be successful, they're going to drive out small businesses, grocery stores, many of which are owned and operated by immigrants that came here from some other part of the country or some other part of the world. You're going to kill those businesses.
Yeah, by definition, these can't work because the government can't do the most fundamental of services correct. I mean, running a grocery store or any business, well, number one, the government can't really run a business by definition, but nonetheless, providing goods and services. If the government were to provide goods and services at that granular scale, that I just can't imagine how bad it would be. Because they can't even get our roads and bridges right, and that's a core function of government.
We can't get mail on time.
Correct.
Yeah. And you want to sell me a papaya?
They're going to make sure the fruit's fresh.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Think of any time the people out there, think of any time that you've ever had a pleasant experience going to a government office.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that at a government-owned grocery store? I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, that'll be a disaster, and they'll be saying. They'll be checking your DEI card, making sure you've met your quotas or whatever. And knowing them in New York City, if you're a Republican, you can't shop at the government-run grocery store. It's just I don't know. I know you're being serious about this report, but it's just so comical.
Oh, it is.
That you've got candidates. You've got candidates that are actually seriously talking about the government trying to run a grocery store.
Yeah. Well, one of the things. This is what happens when you govern with your heart instead of your head. And when you're trying to get a bunch of specifically young people.
It's the empathy.
Yeah, for young people that don't know any better. Well, yeah, it sounds like the government should take care of me and make sure that prices are cheaper.
Right.
And, when they're taught that government is your daddy and government's here to help you and government will fix it from the age of 5 to senior of college, that's why you fall for this.
Well, just like when they say, we ought to be soft on crime. We're locking too many people up, and we're too harsh on nonviolent crimes, and until they get mugged, and then it's not so cool anymore. And so there's a lot of lunacy going on here, Chris. But the empathy, this blind, non-logical empathy of, to your point, thinking about, I don't even think about things, but voting on things and making decisions based on your, quote, heart and your feelings is a bad way to go because those things change.
Yes.
And they don't factor in everything. I mean, this is a terrible way to govern.
It really is. And, going to the minimum wage here, I mean, we're talking about New York City already requires a minimum wage somewhere in the area of $16.50, I think, in January. January 1st, it's going to go up slightly, like another $1. Mamdani wants it to be $30 an hour. Now, this is why it's a problem. A lot of people that have never operated a business, they've never known anybody that operated a business, they just think a paycheck is just some money that the business owner might make and pay people with.
Right.
A business owner is responsible for so much more than a person's wages.
Correct.
The government says you got to do this, you got to do that, you've got to pay me this to open your business, you've got to make sure this, and this are all compliant, and all those fees, all that money that a business owner has to do just to keep the doors open gets passed down to the consumer. And the reason why it's already expensive in places like Manhattan or Queens or Staten Island, whatever, is because the government requires the wage to be as high as it is.
Yes.
The business owner has no choice but to pass that on to the consumer.
Correct.
It's already expensive.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen when it's twice that?
Yeah, exactly, which is what it would be under Mamdani.
By the way, gentlemen, do you realize he's asking for donations as we speak for his all-female transition team?
No, I didn't.
You're lying.
I'll tell you this, though.
Serious. He's looking for donations, and he's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Put on the charade. This is your team for you.
Yeah. Says a guy. Yeah. Says a guy who's a socialist communist, and he's going to make like $300,000, and he's not sharing his salary with the people.
Yeah, and $300,000 in New York City, Chris, actually won't get you very far.
No, it really won't. It really won't.
Isn't that crazy?
Because they're charging $17 an hour for the guy to sack your groceries.
I know, it's insane. Chris, but to your point, what it does, this minimum wage saga, and it's really a facade. What it does is it creates an environment of the haves and the have-nots. And this, if you want to know what it looks like, it's California, right? It's California, and you've got the haves and the have-nots. They've pretty much gutted the middle class in California, and furthermore, this runs small businesses out of the state.
Yes.
It creates this monopolistic society where all the small businesses they either get swallowed up by the corporations or they leave because they can't operate. And you've got small businesses that are running thin margins, narrow margins, including grocery stores, very narrow margins. They don't have just money sitting around to hike minimum wage.
Right.
And when they do, folks, this stuff gets passed on. I'll guarantee you, having just a little glimpse into how to run a business, when you look at your profit and loss sheet and you begin to lose more money than you make, right, which is when you're in the red, every business that does this, the only way you get back in the black is by cutting cost, which means letting people go,
Right.
or you raise your prices. There's only two ways to get in the black. You cut cost or you raise prices. And or the owner doesn't take any profit home, which that's not even feasible. And so what the businesses do, to your point, Chris, I think this is going to lead to the expedited transition towards robotics. And it's going to backfire because this is the Democrats have claimed to be the party of the unions and of the working class, even though we know they're not.
Yeah.
But what they're doing here is their policies are expediting the transition to a robot fixing your hamburger. This is happening right now at the burger joint, which means one more human doesn't have a job.
Yeah, I think we're also going to probably have a housing crisis in the areas just outside New York City because people that have the means to do it will move out of the city to get out from under his administration. And those places, like everywhere else in America, are already in a housing crisis. It's only going to make it much worse. And I know a lot of people think, well, thank the Lord, I don't live in New York City. I don't want to go there. I'm never going there, whatever.
Yeah.
What they're about to endure is going to happen in other parts of the country because the media is going to make him into the next Barack Obama. Some people are going to float him out there as a 2028 presidential candidate, as crazy as it sounds. And because the media is going to fawn over him like they've already been doing, it will inspire and encourage other socialists or communists to run for office in other parts of the country from big cities and even places that might be college towns because they can convince the young people who don't know any better, vote for me and I'll make your life better. And there's a ton of evidence out there to show that socialism and communism, like he's pushing, do not work.
They don't. And one thing that, Chris, we can't keep doing is bailing out blue states. This is what happened under COVID. They used COVID. Once again, we talked about Obamacare and COVID subsidies, but they used COVID to bail out blue states. I mean, you probably remember, but we covered it on the program, how California was going bankrupt. New York State was going bankrupt. They couldn't pay their bills, major deficits. And then here comes COVID, and they're like, oh, we'll just bail everybody out. I mean, this was under President Trump. And they did. They bailed everybody out. And so we've got to stop bailing them out, though. We've got to let them fail and let them live in their own policies.
Government needs to stop doing a lot of things as a way of avoiding things like the lockdown that we're currently in. And I say that based on the fact that I know it sounds heartless, but we're shut down right now over a dispute over things like health care.
Yeah.
The Constitution does not and has never called for the government to do things to
Duly
give you
noted.
health care and health insurance.
Duly
if
noted.
it never had gone down that road,
Yep.
and if senators were still elected by state legislatures and it never changed to the popular vote, we would not be having this conversation right
That's
now.
a good, really good point. That's a lot. That's really, I'm proud of you, Chris.
Thank you.
That was like a mic drop. Yeah. Yeah, because that's the way it was early on.
Yeah.
Was the state, wasn't it true that our congressional representatives were elected by the state?
Yes. The argument was in the early 1900s that we were going to have people like Rockefeller, the billionaires, controlling the billionaires, like Bernie would say, the oligarchs.
Yeah.
Are
Of
gonna ruin
which he
everything.
is now.
Right. More than I have.
Yeah, three multi-million
He's
dollar
still out
houses.
there pushing
Hey, Chris,
oligarchy,
on this government shutdown, if the theory was Democrats are going to get past the election, meaning the election of this past Tuesday, and then reopen the government, but Chris, we're going on Friday, and the government's not reopened. What if the plan is more sinister of the Democrats? This is a theory I've been floating, of which I don't have evidence to suggest, but it actually, the theory holds water, and that is that the Democrats have gone full revolutionary, full I don't care about what this leads to, and they're just gonna leave it shut down until the Republicans can get rid of the filibuster and open the government back up. But I don't think the Democrats genuinely care about the ramifications of the shutdown, because all they're going to do is say Orange Man bad.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to get in the mind of a Democrat, given the illogical things that they do.
It's hard.
I can't tell you what they're going to do, but even when it comes to the things like the filibuster, that's an issue that's kind of divided people on the center right.
Yeah.
There are people that say, look,
I'm going with President Trump on this one.
Yeah, it's got to go away. But then there are like well-known conservative leaders and that you've had on your show, we've had on our network, that would tell you it's a bad idea.
They disagree with us. We said, let's see, 7 years ago we need to nuke the filibuster. We said under Trump 1.0 we need to nuke the filibuster. Because it's log jamming everything.
Yeah, that's true.
It's log jamming everything, and I'm with President Trump on this. And technically he's with us because we were the first ones to do this back under his first term. We did this in 2017 when he was first sworn in. Because the reason we said this is, and I understand the counter arguments, and they're rational, and maybe people are right. But the people that say, if we do this, Democrats are going to ram through their left-wing agenda. Okay, maybe so, but they've got to get the votes to do that, right? They've got to get 51 votes to do that. But right now, nothing is getting done.
Yeah.
Bad is getting done because they keep passing these bloated spending bills, but nothing good is getting done to be codified in law. So all this stuff President Trump is doing is phenomenal, by the way, but it's all via executive fiat.
Yeah.
And you get Gavin Newsom in the presidency, he can unwind every single thing President Trump has done, with the exception of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And here we are back in the same position.
That's
and
very
so I think the White House has really picked up on this. Between now and November of 26, we've got to do some radical things to transform this country for good. Or we're going to be looking back at Hakeem Jeffries.
That's a great
house.
explanation. People like Speaker Johnson and other Republicans, senators, have told me before, like, if we get rid of the filibuster, the Democrats are just going to do it to us, and they're going to make life difficult. And let's be honest.
I think they're going to do that either way. It goes.
Don't lose elections.
Yeah,
quit.
Well, duly noted.
Yeah. See, the problem with elections in our time voting, right, and working here or whatever, Republicans run not to lose. And Democrats run to win.
Yes.
And there's a difference between the two. Republicans walk on eggshells, and they're constantly worried about what happens next time around if I do this. Stop doing that and focus on the here and now to make life better for people. And when the midterms come, you can say, I did it.
I agree. And we may be proven wrong. Running to win may not work out. Maybe. But the reality is, Chris, is we've been doing the same thing for 30 years, going back to Newt Gingrich and Bush and even Reagan, and we're not being aggressive enough on changing and restoring America from the legislative vantage point. And I say we just give it a try. Clearly what we're doing is not working. Congress isn't getting anything done, so let's give it a shot. Let's get rid of the filibuster. 51 votes to pass legislation in the Senate, and let's rock and roll. Let's get some good stuff done. Let's reform our energy policy. Let's ditch Obamacare and fix the economy. We'll see you next time.